Imagine being someone whose kindness lights up the world, whose actions are guided by a genuine desire to help and do good. Now imagine that same kindness, instead of being a refuge of peace, turns into a battlefield. Why do good people, those who seek the best in others, seem to suffer the most social attacks? Why sometimes does generosity and kindness become a vulnerability that others exploit? Carl Jung, one of the deepest thinkers in psychology, left us a legacy of wisdom about human nature. He understood that good people not only carry the light they emit, but also face invisible shadows. And today we are going to uncover the 5 reasons why kind-hearted people become targets of social attacks more than anyone else. Get ready for a journey of self-understanding, where we will unravel how those with the purest hearts often face the greatest challenges. This is a call to reflection, a reminder that kindness is a strength, but it must also be protected. Are you ready to discover the hidden truth behind the social dynamics that affect generous souls? Keep watching this video, because what you will learn will change the way you see your relationships and your role in the world. Reason 1. Boundless kindness is perceived as weakness. When you are constantly kind, understanding, and always available for others, many people do not see it as a virtue, but as a sign of vulnerability. In psychology, this is known as the benevolence exploitation effect. Carl Jung said that the shadow, the hidden part of the human psyche, feeds off what we do not set boundaries for. When you always say yes, when you prioritize others over yourself, some begin to perceive you as someone easy to manipulate. The problem is that human nature has a tendency to test others' limits. If you never set yours, people will assume you don't have any, and what starts as small demands soon turns into blatant abuse. Reason 2. Kindness awakens others' hidden insecurities. When you are genuinely kind, you force people to look at themselves, and not everyone is ready for that. Many have built a shell based on distrust, believing that the world is hostile and that kindness always has a hidden agenda. When they meet someone who acts authentically, they feel exposed. Their subconscious interprets your kindness as a mirror reflecting their own shadows, their fears, emotional shortcomings, and their inability to give without expecting something in return. Instead of confronting that discomfort, they project it onto you. They respond with contempt, coldness, or rejection, because it is easier to attack what they don't understand than to question themselves. This reaction is almost instinctive. It's not about them wanting to harm you consciously, but about a defense mechanism that activates without them realizing it. When they see your ability to give without malice or manipulation, they feel an internal contradiction. If you can do it, why can't they? Instead of accepting that kindness can exist without a second intention, they prefer to see it as naivety or weakness. This way, they justify their own hardness and avoid self-reflection. It's easier to discredit than to admit they have built an unnecessary shell around themselves. That's why often the people who despise you the most are those who wish they could be like you, but don't know how. Their reaction has nothing to do with you, but with what you awaken in them. When someone disrespects your kindness, they are actually projecting their own inner struggle. They don't know how to deal with the idea that someone can act with generosity without expecting anything in return. Their response is to minimize, attack, or distort your intentions to avoid confronting their own inability to do the same. This denial can manifest in many forms: sarcasm, mockery, indifference, or even aggression. But deep down, what they are rejecting is not your kindness, but the reflection of what they feel is missing within themselves. By ridiculing it, they try to convince themselves that their view of the world is still intact and that hardness is the only way to survive. But their reaction doesn't change the truth. Kindness is not a weakness. It is a strength that many fear because it forces them to question themselves. Reason 3. Your kindness challenges social expectations. We live in a world where cynicism and competition are valued more than vulnerability and compassion. When you are kind, you don't follow the unwritten rules of society that often dictate that strength is measured by toughness, not by gentleness. This type of genuine and open attitude challenges the status quo, and that makes many uncomfortable. When people see you acting from a place of kindness, they find it hard to understand why you don't play the same power and ego game that they do. By not following these norms, you become an anomaly in a system that rewards selfishness. This provokes rejection in some because it forces them to question their own values and beliefs. Your way of being kind reminds them that there is another path, one that they prefer to ignore or avoid because it means facing their own limitations or lack of vulnerability. This is not something you can control. You can't change the way the world responds to your kindness. But what you can do is stand firm, knowing that being genuine and kind is not a weakness. Your kindness is not just an act of generosity, it is also a silent reminder of what others may be avoiding. In a world where ego and self-sufficiency are rewarded, showing vulnerability through acts of kindness exposes what people have learned to hide, their fear of weakness being rejected or getting hurt. Kindness is a mirror that reflects those insecurities, and not everyone is ready to see what's reflected in it. When you are genuinely kind, you don't just do good for others, you unintentionally push them to face their own emotional barriers. If you are someone who knows how to give without expecting anything in return, you become a catalyst for change. Although this change is not always welcomed, some will see your kindness as an invitation to open up, while others, unable to do the same, will prefer to keep their defenses in place. This disconnect between who you are and what others expect from you creates discomfort for those trapped in a competitive mindset. Your generosity appears to them as an act of weakness, or worse, of naivety. They perceive you as someone who doesn't understand the rules of the game. But the truth is, through your kindness you are breaking those rules, creating a new way of being and relating that goes against the prevailing values. By challenging those social expectations, you become someone who makes others question, why am I so afraid of being like this? What am I avoiding by being so rigid and closed off? However, the answer is not always welcomed. The discomfort that your kindness provokes can be interpreted by others as a threat because confronting their own emotional blocks is more painful than continuing down their usual paths. Reason 4. Kindness is seen as a vulnerability that invites abuse. When you choose to be kind, you open a door, a space of emotional openness that many people don't know how to handle. In a world that rewards toughness, competitiveness, and independence, being genuinely kind without strings attached or expectations can be perceived as an invitation for others to take advantage of you, not because you consciously allow it, but because your willingness to give, care, and worry about others is seen as a weakness in a system that values strength and self-sufficiency. People who don't understand how pure kindness works tend to read it through the wrong lens. Generosity can be seen as vulnerability, and what you offer with an open heart and no restrictions is perceived by some as fertile ground to be exploited. What some fail to understand is that being kind doesn't mean you don't set boundaries, but it does invite others to explore a part of you that is not necessarily willing to receive the same treatment in return. This leads to a direct consequence. Often people feel they can take advantage of your kindness without worrying about the emotional toll it may take on you. It can be emotionally draining when people see you as someone who is always ready to give, because then they feel they can always turn to you without the need to reciprocate in equal measure. The trust you place in others can turn against you, as those who don't understand the true meaning of your kindness may begin to use it to serve their own interests without considering the emotional cost it generates for you. This leads to internal exhaustion because, even though your intention is to be genuinely generous, the fact that others don't respect that act of kindness may make you feel used or even betrayed. Kindness then becomes a testing ground where what should be a sincere act of connection transforms into an internal struggle between the desire to give and the fear of being abused. The difficulty lies in the fact that your kindness doesn't always align with how others understand or receive it. While you offer your energy and time without reservation, some interpret this willingness as a sign of weakness, not realizing that what you are doing is an act of courage. You are capable of opening your heart without fear of retribution, and yet those who have not yet learned to give in the same way do not comprehend the value of what you offer. Therefore, the act of being kind, regardless of the circumstances, may be perceived by some as an invitation to exploit you emotionally. Those who seek one-way relationships, where one gives and the other receives, are drawn to the idea of taking advantage of your kindness without ever questioning the impact it has on you. It's a painful reality, but one that is constantly lived when you choose to be generous without seeking reciprocity. The price of being kind in these cases is not always measured by the amount of gratitude received, but by the lack of respect for the time and resources you offer, without being valued in the same measure. In the end, the true challenge of being kind lies in the constant need to protect your energy and recognize when people are crossing boundaries. Instead of closing the space to give, you must learn to protect it wisely, so your kindness does not become a ground for abuse. By following this path of kindness, you realize that vulnerability, far from being a sign of weakness, is an act of courage. You expose yourself emotionally, allowing others to see you as you are, without pretensions, without barriers, without masks. But despite your good intentions, many times people do not perceive this in the same way. On the contrary, it's easy for them to take this openness as an opportunity to appropriate what you offer, without feeling any responsibility for what that interaction entails. Often, when you act with kindness, you are giving more than just simple gestures. You are giving time, energy, and in some cases, a part of your being. However, true kindness never expects anything in return. That's what makes it so pure and genuine. The paradox, however, is that although your intention is selfless, in many cases it is misinterpreted, and genuine kindness is seen as a resource to be exploited without consequences. This is where the risk lies. People who do not understand how to build a relationship based on genuine reciprocity generally have no idea what emotional generosity entails. This lack of understanding can lead them to take advantage of your willingness without considering the effort and sacrifice that comes with being there for others when you truly don't need anything in return. By not receiving the respect that your kindness deserves, feelings of exhaustion and resentment can begin to surface, even if the last thing you want is to feel used. It's important to remember that your kindness is not an inexhaustible supply. If you constantly give without setting boundaries, the emotional wear and tear can be deep. You might not notice it immediately, but over time the lack of reciprocity becomes a burden as you become an uninterrupted repository for others. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that your kindness should be a duty for others. It is essential to recognize that your efforts should not be taken for granted or seen as something always available to others. Some may think that if you are kind, you will always be a reliable source of support. But what they don't see is that your emotional generosity also has limits. You cannot keep offering what you don't receive in return without it causing some kind of internal wear. Respect for your kindness must be mutual. Only then can you continue to offer your energy without reaching emotional exhaustion. Don't be mistaken. Being kind doesn't mean being defenseless or willing to accept abuse. Your kindness, if not properly protected, can be seen as a weakness. But in reality, it takes great strength to stay true to it while safeguarding your well-being. The lesson is clear. It's not about changing your nature or ceasing to be a kind person. It's about learning how to manage and balance that natural impulse with the wisdom to recognize when you are giving too much without receiving the respect you deserve. Kindness is a beautiful gift, but it should always be given in the right circumstances, with people who truly value what you offer. Only then will your kindness be an act of strength, not vulnerability. Reason 5. People often interpret your kindness as a sign that you will always be available to them, which can lead them to abuse your time and energy. Genuine kindness is often accompanied by an altruistic nature in which you are willing to put others above yourself. While this is admirable, it can lead to a significant misunderstanding. People may start to assume that you will always be available to them. Unconsciously, they may expect that regardless of your own commitments or needs, you will always have time to listen, help, or do something for them. What they don't understand is that being kind does not mean being available 24/7. What happens with this pattern is that people who benefit from your kindness start to take your willingness for granted. They get used to you always being there for them, without considering that you also have your own challenges, responsibilities, and emotions. This kind of dependency can create an imbalanced dynamic where your time and energy are constantly consumed by the needs of others, while your own needs are relegated. This behavior becomes even more problematic when the other person shows no genuine interest in your well-being and only approaches you when they need something, without offering the same level of support or understanding when you are going through difficult times. The result is that you feel drained, invisible, and as though you are giving more than you receive, without anyone recognizing or valuing the effort you put into maintaining those relationships. It's important to understand that while your kindness may be a gift to others, your time and energy are also valuable. If you don't set clear boundaries, people may continue to ask for more without taking your own space into account. Kindness should not be synonymous with constant personal sacrifice or always putting others before yourself. If you don't learn to say no or place restrictions on what you can give, you risk running out of energy for yourself, which eventually leads to resentment and the feeling of being taken for granted. Balance in relationships is found when both parties are aware of what the other needs and is willing to give. If you don't communicate effectively that you can't always be available, your generosity is likely to be abused. The key is to recognize that there is nothing wrong with taking care of yourself first, and that, in fact, it is necessary in order to continue being a genuine source of support for others. Kindness, when handled in a healthy way, can flourish without leaving you drained or resentful. The cycle of abuse that can arise due to the misinterpretation of your kindness as unlimited availability is insidious. Often, those around you don't do this consciously. Their behavior is based on learned patterns from a society that tacitly promotes the idea that those who are kind and generous will always be ready to help. In this context, your kindness becomes, in the minds of others, a resource they can endlessly tap into without questioning whether it is affecting you. The lack of clear boundaries in a relationship based on kindness can manifest in many ways, from constant emotional demands, such as asking you to listen to problems repeatedly without offering anything in return, to expectations that you will always be available to make important decisions or provide practical support without any recognition of the effort involved. This type of relationship not only drains you emotionally, but also interferes with your ability to meet your own needs, which are equally legitimate. Furthermore, it's not just about the time you lose for yourself, but how your identity can become invaded by being constantly needed by others. You may begin to lose a sense of who you are outside of these interactions. You become the person everyone can turn to at any time, but in the process, you forget who you are when you're not fulfilling that role. Your autonomy becomes compromised because others, in their lack of awareness, begin to perceive you only as a channel for help, not as a human being with your own desires, boundaries, and needs. The real issue lies in the fact that if you don't manage this dynamic, you may begin to feel that your worth is only tied to what you can give. This fuels an internal narrative that makes you believe your kindness is the only thing that defines you, and that if you ever decide not to give, you may be rejected or no longer valued. It becomes a feeling of being trapped in a cycle where you don't feel free to be yourself because you're constantly trying to be what others expect of you. People who don't understand proper boundaries often don't recognize that you, like any human being, also need time to recharge, reflect, and live according to your own desires and projects. When you're constantly setting aside your own needs to meet the needs of others, you end up drained and with no energy to nourish what truly matters for your personal growth. While kindness is a beautiful gift, it is also essential to recognize that your ability to give depends on your own well-being. Only by taking care of yourself first will you be able to continue offering your support to others in a genuine and effective way. However, this behavior also has emotional consequences. When you fail to establish boundaries, what initially seems like an act of generosity transforms into a source of frustration. You become a sort of pressure valve for the emotions of others, but rarely are you given the same opportunity. The fatigue you accumulate starts feeding negative thoughts about yourself and what you truly expect from relationships. You stop feeling valued for who you are and only for what you do for others. This is a dangerous territory because as you keep giving without receiving, you become a figure that is being consumed, not from a lack of kindness, but from the lack of reciprocity in the emotional connection. At times, the people around you may not realize this imbalance. The lack of understanding about the need to establish healthy boundaries creates a subtle yet harmful disconnection. Those who only see you as someone willing to give unconditionally may begin to take advantage of your generosity, and the relationship becomes parasitic. Not because others intend harm, but because they don't know that their behavior is crossing invisible lines that you, by your kind nature, have allowed to be crossed. The truth is, setting boundaries is not a denial of your kindness, but an affirmation of your worth. Saying no occasionally does not diminish the quality of what you offer. Instead, it enhances its impact and authenticity. True kindness does not lie in being constantly accessible and helpful, but in being able to give from a place of fullness without depleting your internal resources. Your light should not be a weak flame that dies as others consume it, but a constant light that remains vibrant because you know how to care for it. Boundaries, far from acting as barriers, serve as vital self-protection mechanisms that ensure your kindness does not become a burden to you. Ultimately, mastering the balance between kindness and availability is essential to maintaining healthy, sustainable relationships. Genuine generosity thrives when it's nurtured by the understanding that you have the right to set boundaries without losing your core identity. Only when you realize that your kindness has inherent value, regardless of how others receive it, can you begin to escape the trap of constant sacrifice and embrace a form of giving that is both fulfilling and sustainable. The absence of boundaries creates a dangerous dynamic. When there's no clear structure about what you can or cannot offer, people begin to expect that you'll always be available. This leads to a dependency that overburdens you emotionally, while others fail to recognize that you too have needs. This pattern is not just emotional, it also affects your personal growth. Without boundaries, you become a passive observer in your own life, losing the opportunity to invest in your own interests, dreams, and aspirations. Your identity becomes molded by what others demand of you, rather than by what you truly need to feel fulfilled. Ultimately, this lack of time for yourself deprives you of the chance to grow and explore who you are as an individual. Relationships that lack reciprocity and respect for boundaries are often imbalanced and shallow. Initially, kindness may attract people to you, but over time, that same kindness becomes expected and unappreciated. Those around you may stop valuing you as a complete human being and begin to see you as a mere tool to achieve their own goals. The key is understanding that kindness needs an exchange, not just a one-way flow. When there is reciprocity and mutual respect, relationships flourish. But for this to happen, you must be willing to show others how you wish to be treated. This doesn't mean stopping being kind, but ensuring that your kindness stems from a place where your well-being is also prioritized. Setting clear boundaries is, in itself, an act of generosity toward yourself. While there may be resistance from those who are not accustomed to you setting boundaries, true respect arises only when people learn to appreciate you, not just for what you do for them, but for who you are as a person. So the next time you find yourself being so kind that others seem to disrespect you, remember these 5 reasons. Recognize that your kindness is a precious gift that deserves to be cared for and protected. It's not about closing off your heart or stopping your generosity, but about giving from a place where you're also caring for yourself. True strength lies not only in giving, but in knowing when and how to do so in a way that respects both yourself and others. If you found this video valuable, I'd love for you to share it with someone who could benefit from this message. Leave a comment below sharing which of these reasons resonated with you the most, or if you have a personal experience you'd like to share. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more content like this, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Keep taking care of yourself, and remember, kindness is a powerful force, but so is self-respect. See you soon.